The screen went black, then red. Error messages flooded my monitor like a digital avalanche. I clicked frantically, my mouse hand shaking as I watched 6 months of work vanish into nothing. Every file, every backup, every single line of code I'd written, gone. Behind me, I heard the sound of expensive leather shoes on cheap carpet. Derek Hensley stood there with his arms crossed, a coffee cup in one hand, that smirk plastered across his face like he just won the lottery. "Maybe next time you'll remember to back up your work properly, Travis," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. Then he turned and walked straight toward the executive boardroom, carrying a flash drive that somehow contained my entire project. My hands stopped shaking, not because the shock had passed, but because something colder had replaced it. Something that burned like ice. That's when I understood corporate loyalty only matters until someone sees a way to cash out on your work. My name is Travis Kellier, and this is how I made Derek Hensley choke on the credit he stole. I couldn't move for 30 seconds. Maybe longer. Time felt broken, like someone had paused reality while they rewrote the rules. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trying one more recovery command that I already knew wouldn't work. The folders were empty. The backup drive showed nothing. Even the version history had been wiped clean, which required administrative access I didn't have. Only managers had that level of control. Only Derek. Around me, the office hummed with its usual Tuesday morning energy. Keyboards clicked, phones rang. Someone laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. Nobody noticed that my entire career had just been deleted. I stared at the empty directories on my screen, each one a ghost of something I'd built from scratch. The automation system that could save the company $3 million annually. The predictive scheduling algorithm that had taken me 4 months to perfect. All of it gone. And Derek was already in the boardroom, probably plugging in that flash drive right now. I stood up slowly, my chair rolling back and hitting the cubicle wall. Through the glass conference room windows, I could see them gathering. The executives, the department heads, the people who made decisions about promotions and bonuses. Derek stood at the front, setting up the projector with the confident movements of someone who'd done this before. My project appeared on the screen behind him. My graphs, my data visualizations, my formatting. Everything except my name. He caught my eye through the glass and smiled. Not a friendly smile, not even a guilty one. It was the smile of someone who'd already won and wanted me to know it. That smile told me everything. This wasn't a mistake or a technical failure. This was planned, calculated, deliberate. He'd waited until the exact morning of the presentation to delete my files, giving me no time to recover or protest. By the time I could prove anything, he'd already be the hero who saved the company millions. Before that Tuesday, I was the invisible guy. The one who came in early, stayed late, and fixed everyone else's problems without asking for recognition. I'd been with the company for 3 years, working as a senior analyst in the logistics technology department. Nothing glamorous, just solving puzzles that made operations run smoother. I wasn't the type to speak up in meetings or play office politics. I just did my work and went home to my small apartment, where I'd spend evenings coding side projects or reading technical journals. When the company announced the Innovation Initiative grant last October, I saw it as my chance to finally be seen. They were offering funding and recognition for any employee who could develop a solution to improve efficiency. I've been working on an idea for months, an automation system that could predict scheduling conflicts before they happened. I knew it could work. I knew it could change everything. So I stayed late, skipped lunches, gave up weekends to build it. And it worked. It actually worked. Derek Hensley had been my manager for 18 months. He was everything I wasn't: loud, confident, always knowing exactly what to say to make executives lean forward and listen. He had an MBA from somewhere impressive, wore suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and could turn a phrase in a way that made average ideas sound revolutionary. He didn't write code or understand technical architecture, but he didn't need to. His skill was translating technical work into business value, which meant he was good at taking other people's ideas and making them sound like strategic vision. In meetings, he'd call me his right-hand guy and talk about our team's innovative approach. I thought it meant he valued my work. I thought they included me. But looking back now, I realized he never once used my name when presenting results. It was always the team, or we discovered, or our department developed. He was already erasing me long before he deleted my files. I remember the night it all came together. February 14th, actually Valentine's Day, which I spent alone in the office testing the final algorithm. The clock hit 2 in the morning when the system ran its first complete simulation. Perfect prediction accuracy. Zero conflicts. The scheduling patterns lined up like puzzle pieces sliding into place. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen with this strange mix of exhaustion and excitement. This was it. This was the thing that would finally make people notice me. The next morning, I showed Derek the demo. He watched silently, his expression unreadable as I walked him through the features and results. When I finished, he stood up and slapped my back hard enough to make me stumble. "This is incredible, Travis. This is our baby. Our ticket to the top." He said "our" 3 times in that conversation. I counted. I should have realized then what he meant. To Derek, art didn't mean shared credit. It meant his opportunity built on my work. The deletion happened exactly 90 minutes before the executive presentation. I come in that Tuesday morning feeling nervous but excited. This was my moment. I'd rehearsed my talking points, prepared backup slides, even worn my best shirt. Then I opened my computer and watched everything disappear. The timing was surgical. Too perfect to be an accident. While I sat frozen at my desk, Derek was already setting up in the boardroom. Somehow his laptop had a complete, working version of my prototype. Every file I'd lost was sitting safely on his drive. When I finally made it to the IT help desk, Ron pulled up the system logs. "Weird," he muttered, scrolling through access records. "Shows here that all your project files were moved to a recycling folder, then permanently deleted at 7:42 this morning." Administrative override. I looked at the timestamp. Derek had arrived at 7:30. I gotten in at 8:15. By the time I discovered the deletion, my work was already being presented as his innovation. I stood in the back of the boardroom, watching through the glass door as Derek presented my slides. My data. My formatting. My 6 months of life. The executives leaned forward, nodding as he explained the system architecture I designed. He used my exact phrases, the ones I'd practiced saying. "This represents a paradigm shift in predictive logistics," he said, and I remembered writing those words at midnight 3 weeks ago. Someone asked a technical question about the algorithm's learning model. Derek smiled and said, "I'll have my team send over the detailed specifications." My team. Not me. Not Travis. Just some nameless group he commanded. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. When it ended, people clapped. The CEO shook Derek's hand. Someone mentioned promotion. Derek caught my eye again through the glass, that same smile playing at his lips. He winked. Actually winked at me. Something cracked inside me that morning, but it wasn't defeat. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, absolute clarity about exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. I didn't confront him. That's what he expected. Rage, accusations, maybe even tears. He was ready for me to burst into his office demanding explanations or threatening to go to HR. That's what desperate people do, and Derek had counted on me being desperate. Instead, I went quiet. Completely, unnaturally quiet. I finished my regular work tasks, responded to emails with professional courtesy, and acted like nothing had happened. In meetings, when Derek mentioned our successful innovation, I nodded along with everyone else. Coworkers asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, just tired. Derek watched me carefully for 3 days, waiting for the explosion that never came. By Friday, he'd relaxed. He probably thought I'd accepted defeat, that I understood how the game was played and had decided to move on. That's exactly what I wanted him to think. Because in that silence, I'd started doing something he never expected. I started watching. Really watching. Patterns, habits, mistakes, weaknesses. Derek had underestimated me my entire career. He was about to learn the cost of that mistake. The first clue came by accident. I was working late the following Tuesday, debugging a routine maintenance issue on the company servers. Most of the office had cleared out by 8, leaving just the hum of computers and the janitor's distant vacuum. I logged into the shared network drive to retrieve some old reference files when I noticed something odd in Derek's directory. Personal files. Lots of them. Vacation photos from some beach resort. scanned receipts from restaurants and hotels. Even PDF documents labeled things like contract draft and side consultation notes. None of this belonged on a company server. We had strict policies about personal data storage. Everyone knew you kept that stuff on your own devices, not on corporate systems where IT could access it during routine audits. But Derek had apparently decided the rules didn't apply to him. I stared at those files for a long moment, my finger hovering over the mouse. I could report this to IT right now. Get him written up for a policy violation. But something told me to wait, to look deeper. If Derek was careless enough to store personal files here, what else might he have hidden in plain sight? Ron from IT mentioned something interesting during lunch the next day. We were sitting in the break room, and he was complaining about increased workload from some audit requests. Your boss has been pulling a lot of client data lately, he said, unwrapping his sandwich. Weird stuff too, like full customer records from restricted folders. Asked me to set up special access for him last month. I kept my voice casual. Is that unusual? Ron shrugged. Technically, managers can request it for legitimate business purposes. But the volume is odd. He's downloaded maybe 15 different client portfolios in the past 6 weeks. Either he's building some kind of side project or digging his own grave with compliance violations. He laughed at his own joke, not realizing how close he might be to the truth. I filed that information away and changed the subject. But later, back at my desk, I started wondering, why would Derek need extensive client data for a scheduling automation project? The system I'd built worked with anonymized operational data, not individual customer information. There was no legitimate reason for him to access those files, unless he was doing something else entirely. I found the folder 3 days later. It was buried deep in the company cloud drive, nested inside several subfolders with generic names like Archive and Legacy Systems. The folder itself was called Legacy, which seemed innocent enough. But when I opened it, my screen filled with files that made my stomach turn. Copies of my deleted project were there, proof he'd stolen and hidden them. But that wasn't what made me freeze. Mixed in with my work were dozens of other documents marked private and confidential. I opened one. It was an invoice from our company to a client, except the numbers had been altered. The original showed we'd charged $75,000 for a consulting project. The modified version showed $100,000. Another file contained email drafts addressed to people at competing firms, discussing mutually beneficial information sharing opportunities. A spreadsheet tracked payments to an offshore account labeled simply personal consulting income. There were more. Screenshots of proprietary algorithms. Client strategy documents. Financial projections marked internal only. Derek hadn't just stolen my project. He'd been running an entire side operation, selling company secrets and falsifying billing records. I sat back from my computer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. This wasn't about my project anymore. This was fraud. Corporate espionage. The kind of thing that didn't just get you fired, it got you prosecuted. Derek had been using system failures and technical glitches as cover for months, maybe longer. How many other employees had lost work because he needed to hide his tracks? How much client data had he sold? How much money had he stolen through those falsified invoices? I thought about going straight to HR, printing everything and walking in there tomorrow morning with evidence that would destroy him. But something held me back. If I reported this now, Derek would spin it. He'd say I fabricated the evidence out of bitterness over losing credit for my project. He'd point to his perfect reputation, his executive relationships, his track record of innovation. They might investigate, sure. But they might also decide I was just a disgruntled employee making desperate accusations. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to let Derek incriminate himself so thoroughly that no amount of charm could save him. For 2 days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted immediate justice, walk into the CEO's office and expose everything. The other part knew that patience would serve me better. Derek had spent months building his scheme. He'd been careful and methodical. If I rushed in with accusations, he'd have time to delete evidence, craft explanations, turn the narrative against me. But if I waited, if I let him continue feeling safe while I quietly built an unshakable case, the fall would be total. I decided to play the long game. Not for revenge exactly, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. but more for the principle of it. People like Derek win because they count on people like me being too afraid or too nice to fight back effectively. They bet on us taking the high road, accepting defeat, moving on quietly. Well, I was about to show him what happens when the quiet guy stops being quiet and starts being strategic. I'd give him enough rope to hang himself. Then I'd make sure everyone watched. I started by restoring one of my deleted project files to the network. Not the whole thing, just a single file labeled Recovered File V2. I placed it in a shared folder where Derek would definitely see it during his routine checks. Then I waited. It took less than 4 hours. The access log showed Derek's credentials opening that file at 2:37 in the afternoon. He spent 6 minutes reviewing it, probably trying to figure out where it came from and whether I'd recovered more. Then he downloaded it to his personal drive and deleted it from the shared location. Every single action was recorded in the system audit trail. His username, timestamp, the specific operations performed. I just established proof that Derek was actively monitoring and deleting my recovered files. That alone wouldn't convict him of fraud, but it added to a pattern. More importantly, it told me he was worried. He thought the deletion was permanent. Finding that recovered file meant I might have more. Now he'd be looking over his shoulder, making mistakes out of nervousness. Scared people get sloppy. I was counting on it. Over the next 2 weeks, I left breadcrumbs everywhere. Small inconsistencies in data files that required administrative access to create. Traces of modified code that pointed back to Derek's login credentials. Nothing obvious, just enough to create a pattern that auditors would eventually notice. I'd learned from my years of debugging that problems rarely appear in isolation. They cluster, showing systematic issues rather than random errors. I was building a cluster. Each breadcrumb led investigators back to Derek's digital fingerprints. Meanwhile, I documented everything in an encrypted folder on my personal laptop. Screenshots of access logs, copies of the fraudulent documents, timestamped records of when Derek accessed or modified files. I organized it chronologically, creating a narrative that would be impossible to dismiss as coincidence. To Derek, his actions probably felt like control. He was managing risks, cleaning up loose ends, protecting his schemes. He had no idea that every move was evidence. Every deletion, every file access, every unauthorized transfer added another link to the chain I was building around him. By the end of week 2, I had enough documentation to establish clear patterns of fraud and data theft. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning, sent to every employee in the company. Urgent, security alert, unexplained access to confidential servers has been detected. All employees must review security protocols immediately. IT is conducting a comprehensive audit. The office erupted in nervous chatter. People gathered around cubicles, speculating about hackers or data breaches. Someone mentioned ransomware. Others worried about customer data being compromised. Derek emerged from his office wearing his best leadership face. Everyone calmed down, he announced, his voice projecting confidence. These things happen in large organizations. I'm sure IT will handle it appropriately. Let's not panic over what's probably just a routine security check. I saw his hand shake slightly when he reached for his phone. I watched him walk back to his office and close the door, something he rarely did. Through the glass wall, I could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing aggressively. He stayed in there for 40 minutes. When he emerged, his confident expression had cracks in it. His smile looked forced, his eyes worried. He didn't realize yet, but he'd already walked into the trap. The audit announcement wasn't random timing. IT had found those access anomalies because I'd quietly reported them through an anonymous compliance hotline 3 days earlier. Corporate announced the full audit the following Monday. Not just a security check, but a comprehensive review of data access, file transfers, and system usage over the past year. Department heads were instructed to cooperate fully with the audit team. All employees would be interviewed about their data handling practices, and all suspicious activity would be investigated thoroughly, with findings reported directly to the executive board. Derek's face went pale when HR sent the memo. I was sitting 3 cubicles away when I heard him open the email. The silence from his office lasted maybe 10 seconds before he called someone. His voice was too low to hear clearly, but the tone said everything. That carefully controlled panic of someone who suddenly realizes the walls are closing in. He laughed it off in public, made jokes about bureaucracy and corporate overreaction, told people not to worry, that these audits were standard procedure after security alerts. But I saw him working late every night that week. Watched him delete files, clear caches, wipe browser histories. Each action left traces in the system logs that the auditors would review. He was trying to cover his tracks, not realizing that covering tracks creates its own trail. Every deletion was logged. Every file wipe was recorded. Derek was building the evidence against himself faster than I ever could. The unraveling happened slowly, then all at once. Derek started staying until 9 or 10 at night, long after everyone else had gone home. I'd see his office light on when I left, his silhouette visible through the frosted glass as he hunched over his computer. He stopped making jokes in meetings. His usual confident banter became curt responses. Someone asked him about the Innovation Initiative presentation, wanting details about implementation. Derek snapped at them to send him an email, then apologized immediately, blaming stress. The audit team worked methodically through departments. They interviewed employees, reviewed access logs, examined file transfers. I gave my interview on a Thursday afternoon, answering questions about my work on the scheduling automation project and whether I'd noticed any unusual system behavior. I mentioned casually that I'd experienced an unexplained file deletion back in March. Told them I'd reported it to IT, but assumed it was a technical glitch. The auditor made a note, asked for the specific date, thanked me for my cooperation. 2 days later, they called Derek in. I watched through the glass conference room walls as 3 auditors spread documents across the table. Derek sat rigid in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. His expression shifted from confident to confused to desperate. I saw him gesture wildly, shake his head, point at documents like he was arguing against accusations. When the conference room door finally opened, Derek walked out flanked by 2 security officers. His face was gray, his expensive suit suddenly looking too big on his frame. He didn't look at anyone as they escorted him down the hallway toward HR. The office fell completely silent. Everyone pretended to work while watching from the corners of their eyes. 10 minutes later, the security guards returned to Derek's office. They began systematically packing his belongings into a cardboard box. Personal photos, his college diploma, the expensive pen set he kept on his desk. Within an hour, Derek Hensley's office was empty except for company equipment. He never came back for his things. Security delivered the box to his home address. The next morning, an email from HR went to the entire department. Effective immediately, Derek Hensley is no longer with the company. This personnel matter is confidential, and we ask that you respect everyone's privacy during this transition. That was it. No explanation, no details. Just corporate language for he's gone and we're not discussing why. But the whispers started immediately. People had seen the audit team. They'd noticed the security escort. They knew something serious had happened. Within a day, rumors filled the gaps. Within a week, everyone knew the truth. HR called it a serious data integrity breach. The executives described it as a tragedy of compromised judgment. But the whispers around the office told the real story. Derek had been selling company information to competitors. He'd falsified client invoices to pocket the difference. He'd stolen employee work and presented it as his own to secure promotions. The audit had uncovered everything: the offshore accounts, the fake invoices, the unauthorized data transfers, the deleted files covering his tracks. Every piece of evidence I'd carefully noted was there in the official audit report. Every breadcrumb I'd left had been found and followed to its inevitable conclusion. What I hadn't expected was how extensive his fraud had been. The audit discovered he'd stolen credit for at least 4 other employees' projects over the past 2 years. He'd falsified billing on 16 different client accounts. He'd sold proprietary information to 3 competing firms. The total financial damage exceeded $2 million. Derek didn't just lose his job. He lost everything. His reputation, his career prospects, his freedom. The company filed criminal charges. The state opened an investigation. Last I heard, he was facing multiple felony counts for fraud and corporate espionage. 3 weeks after Derek's termination, I was called into a conference room. Not for an interview this time, for a meeting with the executive team. I walked in nervous, expecting questions or maybe suspicion about my role in Derek's exposure. Instead, the CEO gestured to a chair. Travis, we owe you an apology. The audit revealed that you were the actual developer of the scheduling automation system presented in March. We've also learned that your files were deliberately deleted to prevent you from receiving credit. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We failed you. We rewarded the wrong person, while the actual innovator went unrecognized. That's unacceptable. She slid a folder across the table. We'd like to offer you the lead position on our new innovation team. Your own department, reporting directly to me. Full control over project development and presentation. And of course, retroactive credit for the automation system. The salary they offered was double what I'd been making. The title was Senior Innovation Director. They wanted me to rebuild what Derek had corrupted. I looked at the offer letter, my name printed at the top in bold letters. My name. Not the team or we or our department. Mine. Thank you, I said quietly. I accept. The irony hit me later. Derek had launched his lawsuit against the company claiming wrongful termination 2 months after being fired. He argued that he'd been made a scapegoat, that the audit was flawed, that he deserved severance and restoration of his reputation. The legal team called me in as a witness. They didn't need my testimony about stolen projects or hurt feelings. They needed the audit logs I'd meticulously documented. Every file access, every deletion, every unauthorized transfer. I kept copies of everything, organized chronologically with timestamps and Derek's credentials attached to each action. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. His lawsuit collapsed within weeks. The judge not only dismissed his claims but sanctioned him for filing a frivolous case. Worse, the publicity from the lawsuit attracted attention from other companies where Derek had worked. 2 previous employers opened their own investigations into suspicious activities during his tenure. Both found evidence of similar schemes. Derek had wanted my project because it represented power, a ticket to executive status and bigger opportunities. Instead, that project became the beginning of his complete destruction. The system I'd built to help the company became the reason Derek lost everything. Sometimes justice doesn't need revenge. Sometimes it just needs patience and documentation. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where Derek had presented my work as his own. The same screen hung on the wall. The same executives sat around the table. But everything else was different. My name was on the presentation. My title was at the top of every slide. When people clapped at the end, they were applauding me. Not some manager taking credit, not some team that had been erased from the narrative. Me. The scheduling automation system was being implemented company-wide, exactly as I designed it. Early projections showed it would save even more than initially estimated, closer to $4 million annually. Other companies had reached out asking about licensing the technology. My new department was hiring 6 people. We had budget approval for expansion, and I had full authority over project development and credit assignment. I made sure every team member's name appeared on their work. No more the team developed or we created. Individual recognition for individual achievement. As I packed up my materials after the presentation, the CEO stopped by. You've earned this, Travis. Not just the success, but the recognition. I'm sorry it took us so long to see what was right in front of us. I nodded my thanks. But honestly, I'd stopped caring about apologies. Recognition felt good, but it wasn't what mattered most anymore. Derek taught me the most valuable lesson I've ever learned, though he certainly didn't intend to. You don't have to destroy people to win. You just have to let them destroy themselves. All I did was document the truth and create conditions where his own actions became evidence. The fraud was his choice. The theft was his strategy. The arrogance that made him sloppy was his fatal flaw. I didn't plant evidence or fabricate accusations. I just made sure the right people saw what was actually happening. 6 months after his termination, I heard Derek was working at a call center in another state, trying to rebuild his life under a cloud of criminal charges and professional disgrace. Part of me felt sorry for him, the part that remembered being invisible and overlooked, the part that understood desperation. But mostly, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet clarity of someone who'd learned to value themselves without needing external validation. I walked out of that company eventually, recruited by a tech firm that actually valued innovation and integrity. Started fresh with people who saw me from day one. Some losses clear the path for everything you're meant to build next. Derek's betrayal freed me from believing I needed to stay invisible to stay safe. His downfall taught me that quiet doesn't mean weak. And his complete destruction showed me that sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just waits, documents, and lets truth speak for itself. The best revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's becoming someone they can never touch again.